was going to check in on one point on the negotiations for the EASA before we land.
Check away.
For this proposed space station, are we really?
Tom, you there? Tom?
In 1983, 9 years after the events of the first season, Ellen has been given command of the Jamestown colony on the moon, while Ed, who has been promoted to chief of astronauts, is approached by Thomas, the White House representative. Thomas tries to persuade Ed to side with him on the subject of weaponizing the future Pathfinder shuttles for Mars, due to the still ongoing space race between them and the Soviets. Not working at NASA anymore, Gordo watches Tracy reveal on live television that she has been remarried. In the meanwhile, Karen has taken over the outpost bar from Pam, with Ed meeting her there, and together with their adopted daughter Kelly, they share a family meal. At NASA, Margot is warned about a massive solar flare, and she informs Ellen at Jamestown, telling her that all the astronauts should hurry inside since the solar flare will release a lot of radiation. Most of the astronauts make it in time to Jamestown, except for Molly and Wibbo, who decide to shelter in a lava tube. However, Wibbo is rendered unconscious after a fall, with Molly saving him during the radiation storm. After making it to Jamestown with Wibbo, Molly lies about how long she was in the radiation storm and is informed that Wibbo will probably die from the radiation within a couple of years. Ellen then tells Molly that she will join her back to Earth and gives command of Jamestown to Alex Rossi. At NASA, Thomas tells Margot and Ed that the president wants to perform a handshake in space with the Soviet cosmonauts as a display of his good intentions. Later that day, Ed meets with Gordo and Danielle, with the latter reminiscing about their time together at Jamestown and tells them that she wants to go back to the moon. Back at NASA, Wibbo approaches Molly and tells her that he will go back home to his family in the Netherlands, since he probably will die within a couple of years. Meanwhile, Ed has summoned a meeting with Danielle and Gordo also present, and tells the group that Danielle as well as Gordo are returning as astronauts. When the astronauts at Jamestown discover that the Soviets have taken over their lithium mining operation, General Bradford and Ed tell Margot and Thomas that they need to send armed Marines to the moon to protect the mission. Also realizing that the Soviets must have been listening in on their communications, they discover that cosmonaut Mikhail Vasilyev had planted a bug when he was captured by Ed. After having received a message regarding her former protege, Aleida Rosales, Margot visits her in her trailer and offers her a position as a systems engineer with NASA. However, Aleida still holds a grudge against Margot for abandoning her, but eventually decides to accept the offer. Meanwhile, at the Baldwin's house, Kelly tells Karen that she wants to join the Naval Academy in Annapolis, causing Karen great pain since she's afraid of losing another child, but finally relents. When Ed then gets home, Kelly tells him the news, and he goes into a rage. However, after calming down, they come together as a family and cherish what they got. While having breakfast with Ed, Karen tells him that he should command the Pathfinder mission, since he glows up every time he talks about it. Following her advice, Ed meets with Gordo and Danielle and tells them that he has decided to be on Pathfinder, while Molly will be taking over his position as head of the astronaut office. In Dallas, Danielle visits Clayton's sister, Ray, who blames her for sparking a sense of patriotism in Clayton, which eventually led to his suicide after he came back from Vietnam, and also confronts her about sacrificing her, a black woman's career, to save a white man, referring to when Danielle and Gordo came back to Earth after Gordo lost his sanity on the moon, but they framed it as if the reason was Danielle's broken arm. After her conversation with Ray, Danielle barges into Ed's office and claims a command position, since she not only sacrificed her status and prestige, but that of the entire black community. Following this conversation, Ed goes into a meeting where Thomas tells him that the Soviets have agreed to a joint mission in space, which leads Ed to inform them that Danielle will command that mission. Following her successful launch, Tracy arrives at Jamestown and is welcomed by the crew, while Aleda joins NASA Mission Control and is welcomed to the Apollo-Soyuz mission, the joint operation between the Americans and the Soviets. Taking his assignment seriously and wanting to overcome his fears, Gordo begins training for his upcoming launch to Jamestown, while his ex-wife Tracy is caught being drunk by her superior and is given a final chance. Having decided that they are sending weapons to the moon to keep the infringing Soviets at bay, Jamestown Commander Alex welcomes the armed Marines arriving at his base. With the Apollo-Soyuz mission being planned, the cosmonauts arrive at NASA. However, both mistrusting of each other, they refuse to share information. While that meeting is going nowhere, Kelly confronts her parents about why they had adopted her. After the disastrous first meeting, Danielle takes the cosmonauts for hamburgers and Jack Daniels, and they slowly start bonding over their experiences with the space program. Their bosses Sergei and Margot, meanwhile, have a meeting of their own and also bond over their country's space and nuclear program and try to find a solution for their docking problem, since the Soviet and American spacecrafts do not fit into each other. However, after some drinks, Sergei uses the pattern on the coaster to develop a mechanism that solves their problem. They head back to NASA and together with Aleda fine-tune the mechanism and present it to both parties. With the Apollo-Soyuz mission continuing, Danielle and the rest arrive in the USSR for training. When Thomas leaves for Korea to negotiate a space agreement, his airplane is destroyed by a Soviet fighter jet, leaving no survivors. General Bradford reveals that US spy planes frequently fly over Sakhalin, the place where Thomas's plane was shut down. So the Soviets thought they were one as well, which later is revealed to be probably true. With Thomas dead, Ellen is appointed as White House liaison and instructs Margot to contact Sergei, who is on house arrest, since the Soviets had done the same to Danielle. Margot visits Sergei and convinces him to talk to Moscow to let Danielle and the other astronauts free. She is then pulled into a meeting and informed by Ellen that the president wants to arm Pathfinder and move up the retaking of a lunar digging site. Meanwhile, Kelly finds out that she was reported to have died during childbirth and goes digging into her past, while Danielle and the other astronauts are released. At Jamestown, Tracy and a group of armed Marines head to a Soviet digging site and reclaim it. After Gordo and Ed say their goodbyes, Gordo leaves for the moon, where he's welcomed back by the Jamestown crew. Back on Earth, Molly is told by her optician that she has glaucoma, probably caused by saving Wibbo during the radiation storm on the moon. Digging into her past, Kelly visits a Vietnamese restaurant and finds a photo there of her and her parents. When locking eyes with the chef, she believes him to be her biological father. At Molly's house, Wayne finds out about the glaucoma and she tells him the full story, while Gordo and Tracy rebuild their bond at Jamestown after he tells her the true story of why he and Danielle left the moon all those years ago. While closing the outpost, Danny, Gordo and Tracy's oldest son, kisses Karen and they sleep together. But after he reveals that he loves her, she makes it clear that it was a one-time thing. At another digging site near Jamestown, the Americans try to chase away the Soviets, but when the cosmonauts keep moving, the Americans shoot them, only to find out that they were reaching for an English translation card to communicate. With one cosmonaut dead and another injured, tension between the Soviets and Americans rise. With the news already having reached Earth, the Soviet Union launches the Buran shuttle, explaining that they will use any means necessary to prevent the US from bringing nuclear weapons to the moon. Trying to find a solution to her glaucoma, Molly wants to go to Guadalajara to see a specialist who claims to offer a cure. However, after a fight with Wayne, who doesn't trust this, Molly decides to accept her fate. At the Baldwin's house, Karen tells Ed that she cheated on him, but not with whom, causing him to leave in anger. Meanwhile, a delegation of cosmonauts arrive at Jamestown to take their dead and injured friend. However, when the injured cosmonaut wakes up, he reveals that he wants to defect to the United States. On Earth, Pathfinder and Sea Dragon, a supply shuttle, are launched, but before launching Apollo 75 for the space handshake, they await if the Soviets will launch the Soyuz shuttle. Sergei then calls Margot and tells her that Soyuz has launched. When everything finally seems quiet at Jamestown, a group of cosmonauts storms the base with assault rifles and kill an astronaut in the process. Gordo and Tracy then find out that they have been boarded by the Soviets, who are demanding that the Americans hand over their comrade who wants to defect. Using an old antenna, Gordo contacts NASA and informs them of the situation, while the cosmonauts and Marines engage in a deadly firefight. A stray bullet then hits a device connected to a nuclear reactor, forcing Bradford to reveal that the US had already brought nuclear material to the moon. Margot informs Gordo and Tracy that they need to shut down the reactor from the outside to prevent a nuclear meltdown. But since they have no spacesuits available, they produce makeshift suits from tape. They manage to successfully shut down the reactor, but at the cost of their own lives. Back on Earth, Kelly tells Karen that she had located her biological father. While in orbit, Pathfinder and Buran are threatening to blow each other to smithereens if the other doesn't back down. Sick and tired of the hostilities, Danielle contacts the cosmonaut Stepan and they perform their handshake for the whole world to see, sparking a peaceful and diplomatic attitude in both the US and the Soviet Union and ceasing all hostilities. With Margot and Sergei still privately communicating, Sergei asks her to share a drink after a conference. However, he is doing it on orders of Soviet command, using Margot as a pawn in their political games. With Mars proving to be a not-so-distant dream, humans finally land on the Red Planet, and the year is 1995, 12 years later.